So when we get to the bottom, we're going to discover that the bottle does not meet the ground at right angles, because that is considered ugly, unnatural, rude. Let me show you. You look out your window and you see this. What is it? No. A telephone pole. Don't you wish they would get rid of them? They ruin the appearance of everything. They're ugly. If you look out of your window and you see this, you see something rather pleasant. And the reason it's pleasing is because there's a relationship of transition between the horizontal and the vertical. Right angles are ugly. Imagine a Greek pillar column looking like that. Gross. Absolutely gross. So if you do this, that helps. You with me? If you do this, that helps. You come down, you don't want this, you want something here as well. You want to soften this. So these bottles can't come out, but they can, from a center line, break. And that helps enormously. Do you see how nicely it works? Now, you get wine glasses that come down like this, gracefully. That's marvelous. They're very delicate, they tip over, they break, but they're very pretty. So we want to avoid that right angle relationship because it's not pleasing, and all of these bottles have been handled that way. Look at your hand. When you want to discover good design, look at your hand. Can you see all the triangles where your two fingers meet at the palm? There's no right angle there. There are dozens of little triangular relationships. Isn't that nice? They're soft. They're gentle. And the intervals, large, middle, and small, are all on the ratios of the golden section rectangle. That's not bad either. So you have here, if ever you want variety, unity, and order, as good an example as the world will ever give you. And you each have two of them, thank God. Pretty good. And I ought to be remembered for having brought this to your attention, I think, you know? But there it is. And notice as we go to the extremities, everything gets smaller, with trees as well. So certain patterns in nature are constant. Chardin is a classical artist. Classical artists, as opposed to romantics, are concerned with simplification. They're trying to achieve as much as they possibly can with a minimum of means. He's doing a study of a mother presumably preparing her daughter to go out for a walk or shopping, and he wants to celebrate the warmth and closeness of this relationship between mother and child. So he's put them in a container. He's put them in a pyramid. He's put them in a triangle. All of that fits perfectly. You've been drawing triangles in bottles. Now we have a triangle. We could turn it into a cone, but let's leave it at that. We have a dominant vertical in this design, and it's coming right through here. And it coincides with this point, and this, and this, and the mouth, and the eye, and where this change takes place here. It hits probably the toe. It's the strongest vertical in the whole program. That doesn't mean there aren't other verticals. There are dozens of other verticals, but this is the principal, this is the dominant, this is the most important. The horizontal, I would have said, would be the ground plane here, and it coincides with her foot and this, and the bottom of that, and the bottom of this, settee or ottoman. But there are other horizontals running through as well, and this coincides with this muff, and it comes through to the top of that triangle, and it's not hitting anything in particular there. The dominant diagonal in this scheme is this, and it's repeated here. You see it. And it's repeated here. it's repeated here. And this coincides with that. It should be parallel. It's coming through here. It's coming through here. So it coincides with that. We can take that through. This is coming down. This is almost there. It's not quite. Then we're running a diagonal in this direction as well, but this one is the dominant. This one's carrying the load. This one is repeated most often. Do you see it? So we have a rhythm going here. The spaces between these diagonals, between these verticals, are called intervals, and they're intended to be read as a rhythm. Chardin is striving to introduce a heartbeat into his work. He wants rhythm, he wants echoes, he wants things that we associate with sound. You have your coordinates running here. You have your vertical center, your horizontal center. You have one going from the back to the front. And you have an ellipse. It has to come outside of this. Okay? It has to come out. This comes here. And this has to come outside as it comes back up. It's got to come outside there. Remember, this cube is seen from above. So the sphere's center is here. You're seeing a bit of the far side. You're above it. It's below eye level to the left, if you were doing this in perspective. Now, what we're going to do in a moment is set up other ellipses that are going to run here. And we're going to build an umbrella so that you get some idea of what this would be if it weren't just thin planes in space. So this is pretty good. We've got the crust, we've come in here, we're coming down inside. It's a little difficult to understand that that is a concavity in a sphere. But once you get used to it, it reads. I think it's a nice piece. The aerial perspective, the lines coming forward get thicker, lines going back get thinner, lines dissolve to pass behind other lines, passage. Here she did one, and this is dangerous because it's accurately drawn, but it reverses. It reverses. This is supposed to be the top of this plane. This is this plane coming up here. Do you see it? And it would come down like this, perhaps. So that would be this unit. This would be the plane here. Rudy Ellett came. He was a master architect, and he had been doing clever things for a long, long time, so I raised the bar. And he did all of the plates for this. Talk about work and time consumed. It was a major project. He enjoyed it. He enjoyed it enormously and had great fun with it. And all of these parts, if somebody were to have manufactured this particular object, would have in fact worked. And the drawing's much better than anything Leonardo ever did, because Leonardo used to scribble these things. Don't tell his mother I said that, please. Set up a truncation that's pointing this way. And what you're after in here is getting this one to turn this way and this one to turn that way. Do you see what I'm getting at? So each stage, you're choosing a truncation that's going to show a turn on that arc, okay? That's what you're after. The first truncation comes here. Got it? So you have a bottle back here, and you have it facing in this direction, for all of the cuts, however you choose to chop it up. Then you're coming in and you're going to move to this. You're going to move to this point, and you might show it's moving that way. So this now turns this way, and we might come there. And then we're coming to this one, and it now is going to be in that position. Got it? Here you can see what I'm after. This is facing in this direction, this is facing head on. That's a bad view. This one you can't see which direction it's going in, and the student was full of fun and has it going in too many directions, and it looks schizoid. I don't want that. I want each one specifically to be looking in one direction. It gives it a clarity, it avoids confusion. So this is a different game, and again, the student got carried away with himself. He's got a system of crusts that are thin, he's got solid pieces, he's got floating masses, he's got, this is fun. He's using the outside of the three-dimensional solid to truncate, which is a clever game, all right? Each time you start, you use a different division. And you do that on every plane coming down. So let's say we do it on that diagonal. So we have this, we have that, we come to this one, and then we can have this on that diagonal as well, and we can come down to here, and we can come out to here. Do you see it? So each of your forms shifts a little to the left, to the right, not paying too much attention to the center line or the limits of the notional space. So what you have to do is set up a vertical, decide where you think halfway is, decide what the width of this is going to be, set up a circle in a square, get all of this going, decide where you're going to place the ellipses for one cone. Let's say I only put one cylinder in here. You see what I'm doing? I'm not moving outside of this, and I am very conscious of trying to hang on to that centerpiece. And all of this becomes really pretty simple as you come down. You don't need the planes. Does that answer your question? Yeah, it's just keeping, that center line is critical. Let me explain up front that if you light the sphere from directly above, you get light on the top, and the resulting image is a two-dimensional disk. It's flat. If you light it from the side, again, it's a two-dimensional disk. However, if you light it at 45 degrees, so this is coming down at 45 degrees, and that is 45 degrees in front of the sphere, so your glitter point is here, and all of this now is light, and here now we have this, we've turned our gyro over so that the highlight is falling here. All of this is in shadow here, and we'll have a cast shadow down there. This begins to look volumetric. And the darkest part, I'm not going to do it as a dark, but the darkest part is a half moon affair that gets larger here that we call the core of the shadow, because all of this is going to be shaded. And then the light that's hitting here is also hitting and bouncing all over the place. We call that reflected light or ambient light, and it's causing the interior of this cast shadow and the interior of the shaded portion of the sphere to have a reflected light in it. So if we use this, which has come to be known as the Rembrandt lighting, we are doing everything in our power to emphasize the third dimension. Start establishing your zone 1 contrasts in this area. Some of you immediately went to distant parts and you are wasting your time, because until you establish what the lightest light is, what the darkest dark is, in this area of zone 1, you don't know what anything else is, because they have to be lower in contrast. The darks have to be lighter and the lights have to be darker. This is the hierarchy, this is the priority, this is zone 1. Makes it wonderfully clear. You know what you're looking at. So when you get this to that, etc., all established, you can do this, and you've got a third of it done, and you've got the most important third painted, drawn, rendered, whatever you wish. Bang! Everything's ordered, because this relates to zone 1, that relates to zone 1, all of this serves zone 1, that does. Your cast shadows, it's easy to render the rest. So remember, if you can get zone 1 established in relationship to zone 2 and 3 and 4, you've got it solved. That's the challenge, because zone 1 will come closer than 2, which will be closer than 3, which will be closer than 4. You've already established the push-pull, and what that means is you are looking down on top of a bottle which is zone 1. Your zone 2 bottle is here, your zone 3 bottle is here, and your background is zone 4. So as you move back, you're going to change the number of values that fall into that zone. They're going to come closer together and be less contrasty. Couldn't be simpler. Really couldn't be simpler. But you have to stay in charge. And too many of you got a little of this done and started doing these others, and that was a waste of time. Because until you have this established, you don't know what you're going to do in the other areas. If she's got her zone 1 contrast, that's very light because she needs it for the edge of this, but that is a zone 3 because that's higher than this. This is zone 2, that's zone 3, and this is zone 4, and that will be zone 5. And she's allowed all of this to merge into a single unified shadow. She's accented the bottom here. She's given you a good deal of reflected light up into all of these shaded sides. The background goes from dark to light, to dark to serve this, to dark to the end. It's really very, very well done. And then she did color studies and ultimately a painting, and many of those larger paintings sold. So this again, I showed you once before, is the Route 2 design, First Communion by Pablo Picasso when he was 13.5 years old. He won a national prize for this effort, and a friend of his father lent him his studio. His father and mother and sister posed for this, and somebody came in to work as the altar boy. 13.5-year-olds don't formalize with straight lines, but Picasso did. This is a Route 2, and it's on the theme of 3. And there isn't a vertical line in anything or a horizontal interval that isn't on the golden section. The candelabra is propped in here on the theme of 3. We begin to see the angle of the forehead. All of these, the collar is parallel to the sinister diagonal, as is this headdress, the top of the Bible, etc. So everything is formalized, meaning it's been not copied. Notice, nobody is drawing what they see. Nobody pursued drawing from observation very far. They all modified, refined, exaggerated, altered, ordered what they were looking at. If I have this bottle coming down, and then I have a bottle coming down here behind it, all right? So I have that gutter. And I have the light coming from the left, so this is light. Then I come in and I have a dark halo to emphasize that, and it's going to pass through the edge of that bottle. And this is coming down and it's going to be dark. And what I'm going to do is have that come over and here with this dark side. And then I'm going to be darker here. I'm not going to be so light there. And if I lighten this a little bit, that negative space goes from dark to light. Dark to serve this. It passes through the edge of this because it's a dark halo reinforcing this. And it now isn't a gutter. Do you see it? Were it all dark or all light, it would pop and it would come forward. But we've subdued it with this transition from dark to serve the light and lighter to serve the dark and the passage and the halo. So these are the devices that you use that allow you in a value study to have gutters, to have these kinds of shapes, where in a line drawing what we did was we had that line come down and dissolve, remember? So it looked like it passed behind the bottle in front of it. And we called that passage. Do you remember now? That was a few weeks ago. Some of you may have been awake. Never can tell. So I'm going to take a series of reverse curves because that's what's characteristic about this leaf. And it's terribly sensual. Imagine if I would come through here and just run a few reverse curves. In no time at all, we're in trouble. Do you see it? Very sensual, the reverse curve. Be very careful with it, people. And make sure that you're over 18. Got it? Okay, so I've got two leaves. I have, of course, this is the notional space of this leaf, and this is the notional space of this one. But I'm going to organize things, first of all, on straight lines. I've got a vertical there and there. This is a vertical, that's a vertical, this is going to be a vertical, that is, this certainly is, and I'm going to make one here. I'm going to take this diagonal, I'm going to repeat it here, I'm going to repeat it there, and here, and I want it to coincide here. That's nice. I'm going to repeat it here and there. I'm going to run the bottom of this and the top of that. Then I'm going to come this way, and I'm going to play with this, and I'm going to bring it through. I've got another vertical here. I've got this one. I've got a vertical there. I'm going to take this diagonal, which is that one. I'm going to take a horizontal here, a horizontal there. I'm going to bring that down. I'm going to put a horizontal here, and I'm going to use that diagonal to soften this. I'm going to make that a horizontal, this a horizontal. I have that, I have this, I have a vertical. Coming down here with this line, carry it all the way to there. I'm going to repeat it there. I've got a vertical here, I've got a diagonal here. I'm going to repeat it through there. So now I'll get rid of some of this which is around and only creating problems. I've pretty much gotten rid of my concavities. I'm going to separate these a little bit more by blocking them in. That will help. I'm going to bring this straight up and bring this over and up and give this a little bit more presence. Then I'll come in with these, the horizontals, repeat that here, a vertical here, that diagonal, repeat it here. That strengthens it, that's better. So what we're having is a real loss of tradition, because the whole system of learning how to draw was 10 years of copying every drawing in the master's closet, his contour. These were the secrets of the studio, and you had to master all of the drawings that this master had collected for years. One of the most famous contours that survived is Rubens. And they don't know whether Pinels, who did all the copies for him, was stealing industrial secrets or had been told by Rubens to copy all his pieces. But it is a secret cache of drawings that all of the apprentices had to copy to learn how to draw. And they had to understand what they were copying, not just copy them like a camera. They had to understand what the systems were, which is a great part of what we're doing here in the figure drawing classes. We want to understand how Michelangelo, Raphael, Picasso solved problems and how architects solve problems. This is a highly stylized, simplified view of the human skull by Bames in his text on anatomy. And it's what I think is probably the best artist text on anatomy that one can find. He's stylized zygomatic arch. He's turned the front of the mouth into a cylinder. Everything is simplified and formalized, but it allows you to see what the forms underlying the skin really are. Then he breaks it down into separate elements. These are student drawings, but you see how the skull, the zygomatic arch, orbicularis oris, and all of this, the spaces in the skull, are oriented. This is a drawing from Harold Speed's The Practice and Science of Drawing, which I require as a text for this course. Now, let's look at what his lines represent. Those lines did not exist in the model. They were forced as a requirement for describing form. Let me show you what I mean. This represents a plane coming here. This down to that point represents a plane there. This represents a plane coming in here. And now we have the eye with the iris, the white, and this would be the bottom lid's upper edge. All right? This now represents a plane here, and this would represent a plane there, and this now is coming down to here, and then we're going to move around for the nostrum. So that every time he sets up a line, he's setting up a plane. Do you see what he's up to? Every single line is doing that. This becomes the edge of the mandible. This drops in. This comes over here. Here he's coming here. Then we're going back to set up the chin. So in every instance, his line represents a plane. If you take a rectangle and you take a diagonal and you intersect it at 90 degrees and you drive a vertical through this and that, this, and that are all the same rectangle. Now we want theme and variation. We have theme, the ratio of this, which is 1 to say 1 3/4, each of these is 1 to 1 3/4, same rectangle. Also, any rectangle sharing the same diagonal has the same proportion as the other rectangle. this has the same proportion as this and that because they have the same diagonal. Carpenters know if you get the diagonal right, you're in business. Then any line that is at 90 degrees to a diagonal will produce a horizontal rectangle of the same proportion. This and this are horizontal, and they should, if they were done neatly, they would have exactly the same proportion. So what do we have? We have variety, we have unity, and we have order. We have unity in that we have the same proportion in every rectangle, and it's identical to the mother rectangle. That's what your art teacher said. You wanted unity, variety, and order. We have order because the sequence of changes, like the sequence of changes on your hand, are from large to middle to small, which happen to be golden section intervals, by the way. Not bad. And we have variety again because we have differences in size from large to middle to smallest, and we have variety from vertical to horizontal to vertical to horizontal. And we have a logarithmic spiral wending its way through this whole operation. So we have an arabesque. We're just going to introduce our Baroque diagonal and the reciprocal, and you can see how her tear duct, her nostril, the corner of her mouth, her shoulder, her hand, all coincide and define ultimately that square. Just two lines. I said every time they were going to prove that I was right. There's the other reciprocal, and we're beginning to see it used here and there and here, and we're going to find it all over the place. The red lines, once again, are the squares. And the other square falls at the bottom of that. So this is a perfect circle in a square. He's a master designer. He wrote a book on design. So here's our logarithmic spiral coming in this direction. But there's another going in the other direction. These are all of our vertical and horizontal intervals. We'll begin to see the eye, the back of her neck. We'll see all the elements it strikes, but that's not the dominant direction. That is the dominant direction. The Baroque diagonal is repeated and pounded, and it's played against this reciprocal. A right angle relationship strengthens the order of the program. You don't have to know how a composer composes. You don't have to know how hard the performer practices and rehearses. All you have to do is enjoy the final serving of the finished meal. And this is it. But if you're an artist and you don't know how it's put together, shame on you. Rubens is not copying anatomy, because if he did, his drawing would look very two-dimensional. He's doing something different. He's exaggerated the deltoid in this enclosure. So this all fits. This is latissimus dorsi, and he's building that in enclosure. He's setting this up, and he wants you to see that it's a truncated cone. External oblique is coming down here, and this is serratus magnus running across this. He wants you to see that this is pectoralis minor, this is pectoralis major. He wants you to see what a volume this is, how this comes ahead of that. This sweeps through. These are moving as cylindrical movements coming down. He's coming across here, and he's got the core of the shadow there and the reflected light. He's playing this all the way through in parallel. That's running through everything as well. If he's running this line here, he's running it there and there and there and there and there and there and here and there and here. Do you begin to see that these rhythms really allow you to draw across the form? I studied at the Ruskin at Oxford in England, and Percy Horton, my drawing instructor, used to come through with this little stump of a pencil, and he'd say, "Myron, draw across the form." This is La Fresnaye, and it's an essay in theme and variation. The theme is the reverse curve. And nothing is more characteristic of the female figure than the reverse curve. Certainly far more so than the male figure. So let's look at the reverse curve. Here it is. And he's repeating it here. And he's repeating it here. and he's repeating it here. And he's repeating it there, and here, and there. He's repeating it here, and here, and here, and there. There it is, here it is, there it is, here it is, there it is. It's repeated here. You don't need much. If that doesn't look like a drawing by Matisse, then I've never seen a drawing by Matisse. It's how little you need if everything is correctly proportioned, and it gives your work a wonderful sense of movement. Can you feel it move? What a clever device. Here's Vincent van Gogh's Man Drinking Coffee. This is a very important direction. It is the sinister diagonal of this rectangle. And it's going to be repeated all the way through. So the lapels, the cuff, the shoulder, all of these lines are running in that direction. And these are intervals along that direction. And what are they? They're 90-degree relationships, aren't they? That is the strongest pair of compared lines you can put down. A vertical and a horizontal. A diagonal and a 45-degree angle. So here is one of the studies he does of this elderly inmate of an old age home. And these people inherited tuxedos and top hats, and they paraded around town in their elegance. And he sat for Vincent, and one has the feeling that the fellow must have been terribly pleased to be getting all the attention that Vincent was giving him. And he must have babbled. He sat there being drawn. Vincent didn't care, he had himself a model, but this funny little man must have been shaking and gesturing and squirming and spilling coffee all over himself. Very animated, because that's what Vincent wants. He wants to have this fellow move. So here is another drawing he did of this fellow before he sat down and really started to design, because clearly these are not resolved drawings, these are rough sketches. He's playing with an idea with a view to, I have a wonderful subject here. If I can find the right approach, I can produce a worthy drawing. And he wants to bring as much integrity to what he's doing as he possibly can. So here he is. He's in this long rectangle. Notice the notional space of each of these rectangles has gone from short and fat to tall and skinny. This is the final solution. And I think you can see that he put his signature on the Baroque diagonal. You see it. That's fun. He knows about these things. So here's the sinister diagonal and its intervals, and we begin to see how important the relationship between the cup and the side of his beard is and his hat. They're related. The way this diagonal comes through and gives you the fingers, and then the eye tear duct, and then it comes up to the corner of the hat. Nothing is arbitrary. It's like poetry. It's like music. It has a scheme. It has order. All the verticals. And look at how this goes taller. This stretches to the left. This suddenly becomes taller, like a cathedral. You think of a cathedral, it's made up of all these verticals, isn't it? And then there are all those arrowheads at the top of all of these gables. And there it is. It leans this way. So depending on which set of directions you look at, the figure moves to the left or to the right. So if we point to 10 o'clock, and we put this here to indicate that this is neutral, that's dead gray. All right? And what we've done is we've said this is pointing to the temperature orange. Color, hue, whatever you wish. Now, if this is gray and this is maximum intensity right out of the tube, and we're not using the color raw out of the tube, and if we place a bar here, we're saying it's a middle low intensity orange. So you could take burnt sienna, add a tiny bit of cadmium orange to it, mix it, and then, because you have a neutral gray, which I'll introduce to you shortly, you add that to it to reduce its intensity, and now you have a very delicate, low intensity orange. Okay? We don't use the word brown, but browns are orange. Okay? They're red oranges and they're oranges. Then, let's say we put a numeral beside it. So we have a grayscale from white to black. And what we'll do is we'll use a 9-step grayscale. And I ask you to make white 1. Others might make it 9. You'll do whatever the teacher asks you to do. Here, 1 is white, 9 is black. In truth, we never use white and we never use black in a painting. We have no use for them. They have no color qualities. So we're saying this is a number 4 value, orange, of middle low intensity. And we know it's in a middle intensity palette. We're not using cadmium orange, that's high intensity. And we're not using burnt umber, that's very low intensity. But we're tuning it. And now we're starting to see what goes on. We can't discuss a color unless we decide what key it's in. So let's look at this palette. And it's got orange, blue, green, violet. Now, I have only 3 colors. It's a middle intensity palette, so I'm using burnt sienna with cadmium orange added to it. I'm using phthalo blue with a little viridian added to it because phthalo's too strong. So you don't want to use phthalo straight. It overwhelms. I'm going to ask you to mix an orange yellow here. And I'm going to ask you to mix a yellow orange here. So I've got this at this point, okay? Remember, I've got yellow ochre with cadmium orange. I've got a little bit more yellow orange here. I'm coming into something more orange there. Then I'm going to come in with a little bit of more orange here. And then when I get to this, I'm going to call that an orange red. And I'm going to a little white so you can see it because it's fairly low. So there's my red orange. And I'm going to take this and a little of that. And I'm going to take this and a little more of this. I'm going to take this and a little of this. I'm going to take this and a little of that. I'm going to take this and a little of this. I'm going to mix along this line. You've got to make sure that your mix here is over the violet red on this side and yellow-orange of low intensity here. And then you're going to have all these neutrals inside. And then you're going to have this sequence going out to all the others. I'm going to have you add white paint to the darker colors because without that, you really won't know what they are. Now you know. Here, it's in the key of yellow-orange. Cover the face and everything is cool. Cover it from above. Everything is cool. Then you expose it. The flesh is very pale, very neutral, and the red-orange beard, for the most part, is very reduced in color. Nothing out of a tube. Everything adjusted. And under here, he's done this light blue, and he's done it under here as well, and it's starting to happen, okay? Van Gogh lays in a blue here that is darker than the one he's laid in there. This one's a little darker. Then he comes in with a lighter blues on top of that, with darker blues on top of this. He's laid in this green underpainting. See it? It's popping up all through here. Then he's coming in with some warm touches and some light and dark touches, and he's done. You've lightened this, perhaps not enough because you've got an oh my God right here, all right? But this is whose?
That's mine.
Okay. This is your problem. You never put that line in. You mix down from all of these colors. You have it laid out on your palette, and when you get to that line, you stop. If you put this down, as you move down, you start to panic. Remember how your heart started to beat and you shook all over? Yeah. And then you have an oh my God here, and you have another oh my God, and then you have an oh, I don't want to tell you what you have. Because you can't hit the target. There's no way. There are too many variables. But if you have it laid out on your palette and you're mixing these colors with that as they come down, when you have painted up to that line, the transition is as gentle and sweet as that, and you live with it. Because you need to be able to, you wouldn't want to be painting a smooth green lawn and have those jumps in it. It'd really rip up everything you're doing. You wouldn't want to be painting the sky and have all of these value changes and intensity changes that are absolutely inappropriate for the weather conditions that prevailed on that particular day. This is a reproduction of a painting by Hockney. And David Hockney is an English painter, School of London, contemporary, I believe he's still alive. He was one of the pop artists that came out of the 60s and 70s. His colleague, Ron Kitai, went to the Ruskin with me, so he and Hockney were in the avant-garde of pop art. There was a Richard Hamilton in that group and a fellow by the name of Peter Blake, who was very active as well. Ron Kitai I thought very highly of. I didn't care much for the pop art idiom any more than I cared for the Warhol pop art gamut. And what Hockney's really doing here is he's working in the key of yellow, yellow-green, against which he's playing a blue, violet, and green. And he's playing the blue, violet, and green against orange. But his color's very raw, and it's very intense. And the contrasts are raw and screaming. And I wouldn't want to live in the same room with this. It would be just too angry, too harsh, and I would not find in the least bit pleasing. And Hockney's work generally, when it comes to color, gets, how you say, up my nose. It's raw, it's angry. The contrasts, if there's this much light on this dwelling, this farmhouse, why isn't it falling on all of these fields? Strange, you know? If this is so strongly lit, why aren't those fields as well lit as these? But everybody's set their palette up. They haven't just started to squeeze out color and start painting. I mean, I've told you, I've been to the Met and I've seen people copying 17th century Dutch or Spanish paintings, and they've laid out cadmium and cerulean, and these colors weren't invented for 300 years, 200 years. And they're adding black to them to get them down where they look like what those artists were using. And their display of ignorance is just painful. I mean, far be it from me to open my mouth. I just keep walking, shaking my head helplessly and feeling sorry for Velázquez and Goya and all the good boys, you know. This is Sicily, and I don't think it's in a key. I find all of this too light. Close one eye, cover that corner with 2 fingers of one. Get used to it. Now the bottom of the table's coming forward, isn't it? Now expose that upper corner, and it's the closest thing to you. Did you see it jump? You cannot afford to have that degree of high contrast in the background, because the contrast, the lightest against the darkest, is going to draw the eye, and that is going to leap forward. So you invest it here, not there. Sicily's not one of the most important painters to have ever lived, and this is not a great piece. But this is the round table, and he's violated this principle of reducing intensity, temperature, and value contrast as you recede, and as a consequence, it is not very effective. This is a student work. It was done many, many years ago. And the student is working in the key of yellow-orange, green, and playing with some blue-greens over here. These are all green, yellow-green neutrals, and being very concerned about the way the light illuminates the spherical form, the core of the shadows here, the reflected lights here. The problem here is that the cast shadow is ill-drawn, too intense, and has too hard an edge. And what we needed here, and he didn't do it effectively, was this light halo which passes through the table to pass through the far side of this and throw this ahead of the shadow. This and that are the same value, so we lose form at that point. This is Uglo again. You can see his golden section touches. He always leaves ample evidence of his grid. And here he's reticulating the surface with bracelet lines that suggest the spherical form, and he's fracturing pieces of the apple which will be becoming planes that are looking in different directions, twisting and turning planes and manipulating them. This is simply a two-dimensional foil. And I think this is unfortunate because the darks here and there throw this as a light figure forward on a dark ground. I think that's an error. I don't think that's a good idea. Had he made this darker and this lighter, he would have made all of these darks bring that upper portion forward. Instead, he's bringing that line forward because there are lights on either side of it, and this is no longer part of that mass of the apple. Like it or not, while everyone else is talking about creativity, and here we're talking about setting problems for ourselves, solving problems, intellectually resolving something. And then there comes a time when you can work intuitively, spontaneously, because you've got the discipline, and you already know what to avoid doing because it's destructive. But these assignments that I give force you to come to terms with the hierarchy, and this is defeated by that high contrast, and this is much more intense than that. And these points do not advance. They're too close in value to their neighbors. I believe the assignment asks you to make this lighter than that. You've made this lighter than this. Do you see it? You could come in now and take that dark halo down, lighten this here and lighten it there. Here it's identical in value. But there's a unity to what you're doing because it's all so neutral. If you hold up a finger and cover the keynote, I think you'll find that since your values are so close, generally when you expose that, it's too light and it jumps off and it doesn't look as if the light falling on everything else is illuminating this. Fairfield Porter is a New York artist. This is one of his more successful pieces. I always find there's a flaw in what he does, and can any of you speculate about what I'm going to criticize as a flaw? Yes?
The yellow all the way in the back.
This, absolutely. It's unimportant, and the amount of contrast he's invested in it, if you squint, competes with the subject, which is a father and his daughter. I mean, there's bad, badder, baddest, isn't there? And this is baddest, and this might be just bad. Let's cover that with your finger with one eye closed. And I think it's quieter, it's easier to look at. It's a little dull, isn't it? Not very exciting. And maybe when we restore it, it brightens things up a little bit, but I still think it's a flaw in a poorly organized painting. This is one of my favorite paintings. Degas didn't win the Prix de Rome. He was always above these competitions because Daddy had lots of money and he could go to Rome if he wanted anyway, and he did. And here he is painting a view of St. Peter's, presumably a sunset, in the key of violet, would you? All of this is yellow-orange, or orange, all of it. It is just absolutely a delightful collection of two-dimensional shapes. He has this zone here, he has this zone, and then he has these violet accents. It is so simple, and it is so successfully a mood. And I have a feeling that he nailed it. we start out with a simple plane, and we want a rising motion, so we come in here. I'm trying to come close to a golden section, interval. That's not bad. This isn't bad. Usually I expect you to either burst into tears or applause. You know what I mean? This isn't bad. So now I have a feeling that the zone 1 unit is moving up. And if I come in here, well, I might, no, I've got to come here. I want this to get wider. And then I break this over here so that I have a unit. And since this is a rising motion, I don't need too much room at the bottom, but I do need more at the top, so it feels as if it's going up. If I come in and I make this my zone 1 light, and then I drop this down, notice I need only do it on the edges. And this is now going to allow this to come forward more effectively than it was. And I could have a halo here that throws this forward, and a dark halo here that throws this behind. That should start to breathe. Is it breathing? Notice, the more I build up this blue, the more brilliant the orange looks. I didn't have to touch it. If we come straight down, and our neutral is at this point, that is where this mix falls, and that, according to Fletcher, is a very low intensity yellow. Do you see it? Its proximity to neutral means it's very neutral. And when you look at it, you won't recognize that it's yellow until you add a good deal of white to it. And this is 4 steps. This is a 4, 3, 5 triangle, which is a golden section triangle. Then if you mix blue violet with orange, it's going to be even closer to neutral. It doesn't look at here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 intervals. It should be closer, all right? It will be even weaker, and it will fall between red, violet, and red. It'll be a red, red, violet if you're boxing the compass, all right? And of course, if you mix green with blue violet, we've only got 3 steps. At that point, it's going to be very powerful. I'd say this is the most successful of the pieces we've seen, because now the use of the key color is subordinated. If you squint, it's close in value to these darks, so that it's a quiet enhancer of all of those warms. It isn't too aggressive, and it's functioning as a keynote. And a keynote doesn't necessarily mean that it's where your eye goes, but it's the entry that brings a spike to everything else. In a dark painting, it's the light note that makes the darks ring. In a warm painting, it's the cool note that reinforces the richness of the warms. This has atmosphere. It's a little difficult because of the intensity of all the color, but it has more atmosphere than any of the previous pieces had.